Public comment, and then when we do that.
No card required.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the May 13th Community Advisory Council meeting. We're going to call this meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. and we'll start with introductions by going around the room. My name is Lorena Barrera and I represent District 3.
Lisette Camacho, and I'm with ILO.
Nathan Solomon, District 1.
Casey Jones, District 2.
Trevor Ward, District 3.
Eventual Dale member at large.
Michael Miller, District 4.
Susie Marches, District 1. And I'm Jennifer Salido, Assistant County Executive with the County of Sonoma, and this is my first ILO CAP meeting. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you for being
Thanks for
here.
being here.
We are going to item 2, approval of the April 8th, 2026 meeting minutes. Do CAC members have any comments on the minutes or questions? If not, we'll open this item up for public comment. Is there any public comment on the minutes? No? Anyone? No? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back for a motion.
Move to approve.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Second, Trevor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Nays? Okay, thank you, that motion carries. And if I could just make note of the due date or if they were late, that one is coming. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 3, current member attendance, openings and appointments. I believe the attendance report was included in the agenda packet, so please take a look, make sure that you're meeting all the attendance requirements that are in our bylaws that have been approved by the CAC. We have a minimum number of meetings that we're supposed to attend, so make sure that you're current on those. And then we also have 2 openings, one in District 2 and one in District 5. So if you know anyone who's interested in serving on the CAC, please let them know to apply and contact their supervisor. Moving on to item 4. So for the Sheriff's Liaison Report, Lieutenant Kidder had previously informed us that he was going to attend his son's Little League game, which is why he's not here today. So we won't have a Sheriff's Liaison Report. And we don't have any public correspondence to report from the CAC, so we'll turn it over to John for the ILRO's report.
Good evening. Sorry to be late. Thanks for your patience with me. So as I think you know, next week's my last week here as your ILRO director.
No.
Thank you. I won't be far away. I'm starting a job as the Inspector General for Marin County, which is a parallel position, but also new. That office is just starting, kind of like ILRO was 10 years ago. So we'll see how that goes. I'm looking forward to that new challenge, and I've appreciated the time here. A few things to talk about over the last month, since I usually do give you a report. The Truth Act report from the Sheriff's Office was on the Board of Supervisors agenda last night, Tuesday night. It's a fairly long meeting, but I'd recommend it to you, particularly the people who are on the immigration ad hoc, because you can get a sense of community sentiment about it, what the sheriff's currently saying about when his agency does and does not communicate with us. And then you can get a little bit of information also about the Board of Supervisors' thoughts and questions for the sheriff on those same topics. Right? It's a bit of a long meeting, but I think it's worth a watch. Some people have asked me, well, if John's gone, who's the next ILO director? I think the Board of Supervisors has a lot of latitude in figuring out what they want to do next. As Measure P says, the ILO director is appointed by the board. So they could do any number of things in that regard. We'll have to wait and see what they choose to do. One of those things could be to pick an interim. That's happened in the past. So when Carly Navarro left, the board appointed an interim, Garrett Byers. So presumably they could do that here too. Our chief deputy, Mike DeSoto, has in his county job description that part of his position is to act on behalf of the director when the director is not around. So if it takes the board a little bit of time to decide what to do, or if they don't act, I'm the guest de facto, they get to make decisions as the acting director, given that civil service language. But I think it's always a little cleaner if we, get some direction from the board, but we'll have to see what that is.
Speak up a little louder, sorry.
Yeah.
Bring in from-
Yeah, sure. We have, obviously we'll have an annual report in the fall, right? But I don't have say in an exit report, for all of you. I think you've been seeing a lot of the work that we can make public, rolling out as it's been coming out over the last year. So I don't have something, new to update you about. I am happy to take, some questions from the CAC members, because I know you all have had a really busy time, and we have a lot of agenda items tonight. So I'd also just throw out there that since I won't be too far away, I hope you'll feel free to reach out and ask me questions, even after I go. Pretty easy to find. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve the people of Sonoma. It's been super educational for me. It's also been a real honor to handle this work. And I really appreciated it. It's been quite the privilege, so thanks.
Thank you, Joel. Well, I just want to say that I think from day one, since you started here, you've done a great job. I feel like all of the work that you've done in making sure that Measure P and that it's respected, and that the work that IOLERO is supposed to take on is also conducted in the best way possible. I think your work on oversight has been great, and I had planned on putting something together and I didn't have time. But overall, I just want to say I think we're really gonna miss you. I feel like you've done a lot for Sonoma County when it comes to oversight. And I think you're gonna do a great job wherever you go. And I hope that the Board of Supervisors, really takes it seriously and puts someone in the position that will take the job as seriously as you did. I feel like we owe you a lot. Thank you. And I don't have any questions.
No questions. I want to echo some of that too, though. I mean, you have been a fantastic director. I have, gone through a few of them at this point, and you did an amazing job really from the beginning. You were easy to work with. You're a great communicator. You explained very complex issues in a thorough and methodical and complete way. And I always appreciated that. So I'm really sorry to see you go. And I think Sonoma County loses something when you leave there, and you've really raised the bar for the director of IOLERO, and I look forward to making sure that the Board of Supervisors, keeps it high. So thank you so much for your service, and we'll definitely be reaching out to talk and chat and compare notes. So thank you.
John, you know how I feel. Thanks for being so available, and a lot of one-on-one discussions and thoughts about the work that I was involved in really helped me tremendously. I do want to ask you to do a little more work in explaining to us. I mean, you had to move on, God bless, understand. There are pieces of work and initiatives that are very much midstream right now. I mean, far more than I know about, but certainly the litigation with the sheriff and the DSA is very much midstream right now. The discussions about the future of Measure P are very much in the air publicly. You know, there are a number of things in the air. I wonder if you could speak to some of those things that I identified, how you see Iolero being led and helping the county find its way in some of those items, how that's gonna go starting next week in your mind. Anyway, it would be useful to hear about some of that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, as for the litigation about the whistleblower sentence, I had heard maybe a month ago or so from the sheriff that he was planning on not asking the state Supreme Court to review the appellate court decision, which would be the next step if one wanted to escalate the appeal and the final venue to which one could appeal a case. But then he did get back to me and say that he would in fact appeal the case. And so now we have what's called a petition for review from the sheriff that's in front of the California Supreme Court. And we'll have to wait to see the California Supreme Court resolve whether they want to look at the case. So they're not required to hear argument about it. They're not required to delve into it at all. Kind of like the US Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court has a lot of discretion about which cases it chooses to take on. And they might choose to just do nothing. They might say that they're not interested. I've never seen with my own eyes statistics about how often they take cases, but other attorneys that practice in this field tell me it's something like 4 or 5% of cases that when litigants ask the state Supreme Court to look at it, the Supreme Court will actually look at it. The other 95 or 96% of the time, they just say no thank you. So I suspect in a couple of months, we'll probably get a decision back from the state Supreme Court saying, we'll take a pass, we'd rather not take a look at this. And then it takes a couple of months for the decision to get sent back down to the local court here in Sonoma County, where that court would then issue an order to the sheriff to provide the material sought in the subpoenas we issued in the whistleblower case. We have other whistleblower cases, so that would allow us to then move forward on those. We have a whistleblower portal that we have for some time been recommended we should tell county employees is available and is out there. I mean, you can find it on our website now, but there's a labor code provision that suggests it's best to inform employees proactively of the fact that that's available. And so when this decision's over, that would be another next step, is get an email out to employees all across the county explaining the availability of the whistleblower program and how to submit a complaint. So those are some things coming out of that litigation that we'll see over the next few months, regardless of who the director is. Those issues would have to be addressed at least. And then as for, say, some of the issues around Measure P, one of them has been, will deputies talk to Iolero when subpoenaed? And we can't always tell you about what's going on in cases like that, but some of the cases that we work on are public under SB 1421. Like the David Pelaez Chavez case, which all of you have had a chance to see. We have another case like that. It's often referred to as the Todd Road shooting. And just this last week in that case, all of the deputies in that case, regardless of the level of their involvement, all refused to speak to Iolero, and the sheriff would not order them to talk to us. So we'll be releasing a report about that case shortly.
I'm sorry, did they attend and invoke the Fifth Amendment privilege, or what did
They
they do?
informed us in writing that they would be invoking Fifth Amendment privilege as to all questions. In most venues, like in civil or criminal court proceedings, when that happens, people are required to show up and actually do that in person as to every question. The Board of Supervisors has asked Iolero to not do that, and to instead just take that invocation by letter as the end of the issue. So we did not have them come in and answer questions individually like we did in the David Pelaez Chavez case. But that also means there's a report coming fairly soon, because all the other work in that case is public facing. There's already a public facing report from the district attorney's office about that case that you can find online. And you'll see in there a number of questions you would expect to have answered in an administrative investigation, like why did one of Sonoma County's deputies intentionally run over another Sonoma County deputy with their patrol vehicle? We only have partial answers to that question, and we're not going to be able to dig into that as much as we would like. We're also not clear why aid wasn't rendered, as you'll see in the DA's letter, promptly when that happened. I'd like to know the answer to that question, but I'm not going to. So you'll see a more complicated report talking about that. It'll be another instance of that same problem. We have another agenda item on tonight about whether there's any movement about trying to amend Measure P, and I can answer questions about that, but maybe we'll make that part of that agenda item, but so we don't repeat ourselves. And then another issue coming up for Isle Aero in the near future is that, as I've mentioned to you before, Measure P requires Isle Aero to commission an audit of itself every 3 years. And that audit's already underway. The contractors we hired for that purpose made a lot of progress on that over the last couple of months. They're slated to finish that sometime before the end of the fiscal year, so maybe June. That does depend on how much access they get to all the materials they need. And I know they're interested in looking at some materials at the sheriff's office and talking to some people there. So the scope of their work might depend on how much access the sheriff chooses to give them. So hopefully that will be a public facing report that will probably be available over the summer. What did I miss?
Well, I don't know. There's just so much going on in your office that I know nothing about. So, I mean, is it fair to summarize by saying, and forgive me for being, pedantic maybe. But is it fair to say that you are sort of handing the baton to, is it John? Michael, for the purpose of whatever interim period this is. So that the work that you have sketched out for your group is in good shape going forward in your mind?
Yeah.
As good as it can be.
I think so, and part of the reason we devised the position he holds now, the chief deputy position, is to have some succession planning and someone in a management position who understands what's going on in the office if anything happens to the director. And he would be in a position, if he's not the interim and someone else is, to at least pass on to that person, here's everything that's happening and here are the decisions you need to make. Here's where our thought process has been so far. And again, I'm not far away, but on the other hand, it's better to have somebody in the office who knows all those things.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm sorry, did I miss it? But who exactly is it who conducts the every 3-year audit of Isle Aero?
Oh, we put out a bid, or sorry, request for bids or proposals, and got back half a dozen or thereabouts to different auditors who were interested in doing the work. We've got a group called Pivot, PIVOT. And some of their members are people who have been oversight practitioners elsewhere, particularly in California and Washington State. And so we thought they had the most appropriate experience and got it started on it.
Any other questions from CAC members? Comments?
Sorry, not a question, but no, I also did just want to echo how grateful we were to have you during this time and what a fantastic job you did. And like Casey said, making yourself available, I really, now that I see you going, I wish I had taken much more advantage of it, but I do really treasure that time you spent with me at the coffee shop, and then I was very impressed with the time you gave me, and you've just done a fantastic job all around. And I absolutely agree that I think you've raised the bar with your level of attention to detail, your clarity of informing us as a body, which helps us to inform the public, but also just your level of humility. I think has served you so much in this role, that you are so diplomatic, and even in really hard conflicts where you have to take a hard stance against some very heavy hitters in the sheriff's department, DSA, but everything you do, you really do with so much humility and grace. You've just been a fantastic leader for us, and I'm really grateful we had you. And Marin's lucky to have you, and I look forward to seeing how things develop there.
Thanks, Charlie.
And since I'm the newest member, I really haven't worked with you very long, but I've heard some wonderful things from the team, and you are so highly regarded. And I'm gonna miss out on that. You'll regret it. Good luck.
And it's a late summer to this meeting. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed working with you, John. It's been a really, really deep pleasure. And I've had a lot of experience working with a lot of different EDs and sitting on a lot of boards, and you're right there in the top tier. And we're really gonna miss you, and Sonoma County's gonna miss you. And I will just say that I have learned from you a lot about diplomacy. I don't know that I can copy it. You know, but you've modeled great diplomacy, and I really appreciate that.
Here, here.
Okay, so now we'll take public comment on the oral reports. And we'll do 3 minutes.
I have 2 questions. First, or 3 questions actually. Who did the audit 3 years ago? What organization did that audit? And is that report out and available for us to review so we can compare it to the new report that'll come out in the next few months?
Would you give me all your questions, then I'll take everyone else's questions, I'll answer them all. at once.
Yeah, it's not,
Perfect. Sounds great. Second question is, when can we expect a report from Pivot? And then the third question is, when can we expect the closing or end of term report from you?
and is that the end of your public?
That's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments?
Yes,
Um.
you folks don't know me. My name is Wayne. I'm from Roseland. Basically appreciated all the work this gentleman did. We've never met. I appreciate Measure P. I do believe you could do something that's a bit unusual, but would be very helpful to us general members of the public. The military calls them after action reports. And the moment something happens, once it's done, the person who's been in charge of that action writes something up and tells the people that are going to read about it as much as they can. I believe that'd be very helpful to us because there's a deliberate effort to undermine Measure P. And it's very well financed. And it is, in my humble opinion, perhaps disingenuous and maybe just outright dishonest in how these things are going forward. This is not to put you on the spot about any kind of a under oath type of statement. This is just after action. Tell us what was going on, give us the news to use, and then down the road, I wish you the best in Marin. And think about coming back if we can have Measure P be fully implemented in the future.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to echo, my thanks, and I think Stone County has really lost a major resource in oversight. And someone that is probably, you know, on a national stage, one of the few at that level of understanding and implementation. So appreciate that. We're gonna really miss that, and I'm very envious of mine. And then the question I had was on the budget, to understand how far, I know we've got the minimum budget requirement in Measure P, but there were just budget hearings, and how far out is the ILR budget approved under your structure? Because I'm like somebody coming in to just redo a budget. I just don't know how far out that's. And we're in Michigan.
Any other public comments? Okay.
I echo the diplomacy. I've watched you with eagle eyes. It's very impressive. I have a question. I don't know if this is the right person, but the sheriff mentioned at the QPAC last night that there was a new policy as of yesterday about who he is going to respond to when ICE makes a request. And I just wondered if you or somebody in the office could get that policy for us. It was mentioned really at the very end of the meeting.
Is that the end of your comment? Okay, thank you. Any other help? Yeah, go ahead.
I want to personally thank you, Director Alvin. I know that I am a big bold personality. I do not have the poise and grace that you do. I appreciate your patience, but also your zealous advocacy. And it is a hard thing that ILARA was created 10 years ago. And let's all be candid, this is the second director that has been pushed out. And so I am I do not envy your task. Having both outreach and the auditing capacity for the same agency is an inherent conflict, and you have done it beautifully. So I appreciate your willingness to dive in deep on issues like SB 54 and True Facts. And communicating with community members, not just at a tabling events, but really describing what people can do to file complaints in a way that's accessible. And as a result, there's a family from last year that has now something that they can send to the Attorney General, that they can, if they need to, file toward. And I appreciate your integrity to take up those issues despite any personal backlash, like bar complaints that you've had to suffer as a result. So thank you for all of your diligent and diplomatic work. And I hope, my one question would be, what can we do as a community to prevent another pushing out of a wonderful director? And how can we support the continued existence of Iolero?
Thank you. Another comment? Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, we'll go.
Yeah, Paul Weaver from my part, I want to say you raised the level of professionalism here. As reflected especially in the reports, and I'm just hoping that the next directors can maintain operations at the same level. And the same level of effectiveness. It's really good at pleasure to read the reports. They're disturbing as reports at one level or another level. They're so well done. Thank you.
Any other comments? And if we could just have everyone speak up a little, we've had people communicating with Lizette that they can't hear us. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to echo everything that everyone said. Thank you so much for your gracious service and the way that you have held this office. And I want to reiterate, the abuse that you had to take has been outrageous and offensive. And I'm really sorry on behalf of my community that you had to deal with that. And I think the Board of Supervisors has been derelict in their duty to support Iolero, and I'm shocked that they would ask you to receive a letter. I mean, just that little tidbit you just shared on top of everything that I've been following is just appalling. So thank you, Maureen. Maureen is so lucky to have you, and I hope that we can, we're not gonna stop. We're gonna keep coming here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Robert Evans from Spousal. And I want to also thank you and say that you did your job too well. And I'm a tremendous skeptic of all things law enforcement oversight and accountability. As a democratic process, I've been part of it a lot. But you took time to meet with some of the loudest skeptics in the very beginning, as soon as you started, which was like the best sign. And I didn't feel like I needed to run my mouth most of the time during your tenure. And I appreciate that. And now you're leaving and now I'm back.
Thank you. Any final thoughts? Any comments? Okay, it doesn't look like we have hands raised from attendees online. So we'll close public comment and we'll bring it back. And John, if you can answer some of the questions. I know you said that the audit is going to be done sometime in the fall. You did say that, the annual report. Answer when we have questions, and then you said maybe in June is when the Iolero audit would be done? Or July?
Right, our annual report I'd expect to be done in the fall as we normally do, and we're already working on that. The pivot triennial audit of ILAO, we expect to be done sometime over the summer, but it depends on, you know, how much the auditors can get to what they need and how long it takes them, so that really is up to them, right? There is no prior audit, so there wasn't an audit 3 years ago. This is the first ever triennial audit, so there isn't another one to look at. But it'll certainly be a model for what community maybe you might want to have looked at in the future, right? So it'll be interesting to see how that lands with the public. A couple people asked if I would do, you know, like an after action report or a closing of term report, and I hadn't planned to, but now that a couple people have asked, maybe I should. So I'll think about that between now and Wednesday. See if I can get that done.
Quickly, just get us something good to read.
He'd like to do it while he's getting paid.
I might not have beautiful graphics attached, but maybe I can get you something that's at least some decent text between now and then. The ILARO budget, like all the other budgets for county agencies, would be approved in June. Last I checked, those hearing dates for mid-June. You know, we didn't ask for any change, and nor has anyone suggested to me that the ILARO budget was going to change, and our budget allocation is within a very modest number of dollars of that 1%, you know, mandatory minimum threshold we have. So I wouldn't expect to see any changes in June. I don't know what those would be. Certainly not the overall amount, because we're certainly not getting any more money, nor would it be lawful to give us less money, so I don't think that's going to change. I have not seen the new policy that was described at the Truth Act last night, but I would love to see it. And, you know, all of those policies are a matter of public record. Many of the sheriff's office policies are on their website if you know where to go. That particular link is a little hard to find, and they're the first to say their website needs improvement, and I appreciate them pointing that out. But you can find those policies there if you Google them up. I don't know if that policy is up there yet or not. But it is a matter of law that those policies have to be public facing, so if we can get a copy of that, I would certainly share it. And you know, there's a question about what community can do to, you know, support directors of ILARO. I mean, I think that one of those things is to be really clear with leaders in the county about what you expect from ILARO. Positive, negative, indifferent. If you like what ILARO is doing as it is, let them know that. If there's something ILARO is not doing that you want ILARO to do, let them know that too. If there's something ILARO is doing that you think is a mistake and you'd rather ILARO not be doing that, speak up about that. But whatever you do, speak up. Because if people say nothing about whether they think the oversight that they're getting from the law enforcement agency is working for them or not, then there's always this pushback on oversight in every community, right? And so there just is a natural tension in the way policing agencies are set up that they can fall into being defensive and maybe not self-critical enough. And many of us have that. And you think about our own personal lives, like many of us could probably think of a time when we wish we could have been a little bit more self-critical, or we wish we could have been a little bit more transparent with the people around us. It's a human tendency. It's a tendency of institutions. And institutions tend to be more transparent and more self-critical when the public demands it. So it's really up to you.
Thank you, John.
Another clinic in diplomacy, John, well said.
You all created ILARO, and you get to keep it if you choose to keep it. That's up to you to say that you want to keep it. If you don't, then you might not have it. Thank you.
Since he made a quick comment, I just wanted to
Well-
comment quickly that if you could put guidance in, if you consider doing a closing end of term statement, if you include guidance of what you expect or would like to suggest in the future for ILARO and the incoming director.
Thank you,
Thank
and
you.
we won't. So interruptions are not allowed, and he actually can comment because he's on the CAC. The public has time to comment during public open time or during the public comment time. And then once we close that out, the public can't comment on that item anymore. So that's how it works. But members who serve on this body, we can comment multiple times. That's kind of how the Brown Act works. But thank you for your comments. And if you have any other questions or things that you'd like to bring up regarding these reports that were brought up, you can send an email to cac@sonomacounty.gov. Then on the remaining items on the agenda, we'll take public comment on each one, and you'll have an opportunity to comment on those as well.
Great, thank you.
So we'll move on to business item 5. Discussion and possible action regarding Supervisor Hermosillo's plans to amend Measure P. So this item is on the agenda because I know a lot of us read that Supervisor Hermosillo was quoted in the paper. I think Nate also, you asked to have this item on the agenda. And it was mentioned that she was working with stakeholders. So I think several of us checked in with Supervisor Hermosillo on that. From speaking with her, when I spoke with her, she had already spoke to Clean and Nate, I believe, and said that she had not started the stakeholder conversations, but she did want to work on I guess fixing Measure P or adding things to it. And so she told me that the county executive's office was going through like a staff transition, or they were gonna have a new CEO or something like that. So the conversations with stakeholders had not started. And I did tell her that it was good to know, and that, in my opinion, John, who's now leaving us, should be involved in those conversations, and the CAC should be involved. And they should be counted as stakeholders when those conversations do start. So she did, Supervisor Hermosillo was invited to this meeting. And she asked staff from county council to attend to help answer questions that we might have about maybe what the process would be if there was an amended Measure P put on the ballot, or to provide any other information that they might have. I don't think the work has been started, so I don't think that they can comment on that. But if there's anything that you can share, I think we would love to hear it, because there's a lot of information out there that, or I guess rumors and information that we think are not rumors, and we want to make sure that we hear directly from the people who are going to be working on this, because there's also a lot of concern when we hear words like repeal and things like that. I feel like that means something different than amending or enhancing, or repeal to me is a concerning word. And so I think we'd like to hear if you have any information on what the intent is or anything like that. And also, we did receive a statement from the sheriff, who I did inform as well that we were gonna have this conversation, and that was included. I think everyone has a copy. If you don't, there might be some back there. But the sheriff provided a statement regarding what he thinks we should be changing in Measure P.
I'd like to get a copy of that. I understand it, sure.
You wanna add anything?
I got you.
So I'll turn it over to you, Jennifer.
Yes. So my name is Jennifer Solito. I'm one of two assistant county executives in the county executive's office. I'm gonna clarify my role just a little bit, because I'm clearly not Rebecca Hermosillo, and I'm not an elected. I don't work in her office. Also not part of county council, so you're sort of getting the third string here. Just to be very clear, I'm not an attorney. I work in the county executive's office as sort of an administrator. My role, I'm one of two assistant county executives, and I help oversee or liaison with the safety net department. So that's health, human, child support, and community development. And then also all the justice partners. So that's sort of my role within the county. And I work closely with John, mostly on like policy, budget related issues, any items that are going to the Board of Supervisors, part of that review process, and then sort of special projects as this one would be. So just to sort of clarify what my position is in the county. And you are correct, we have a new CEO, county executive, David Ewan, who started, I think, about a month ago. It was April 20th. So he's quite new to the county. He was the city manager in Sonoma, so not new to Sonoma County. Also was assistant city manager in Santa Rosa before that, but new to the county on this whole process. So any questions about maybe my role first and my position in the county?
Can I add a little something?
Yes, please.
Jennifer's being very modest. She has spent a lot of time chatting with us at ILR about all we do. I've been meeting with her roughly every 2 weeks for the last year or so. And I really appreciate all the time she's put into doing this preparation. You're welcome.
And just as an addition to clarify that, so the ILO director is appointed and reports to the board, and then when the board of supervisors made a change. Maybe a year, 2 years, time's running together for me, to go from a CAO, county administrator model, to a CEO, where more department heads are reported and appointed by the CEO. The director's position is sort of a hybrid, right? It's appointed by the board and then reports to the CEO for sort of daily operations, the budget, the policy stuff, the board item things. And then that's sort of been delegated down to me to work with John on sort of the day-to-day questions and issues that come up, where there just isn't capacity for the CEO or the board to weigh in. And then when things need to get elevated, we kind of turn around that.
Yes.
So that's my role, why I'm here today. So this will probably be a very unsatisfactory conversation, because I know people want to know, what are you talking about? And what specifically are we looking at? And I'll just say right now, I don't know, right? We have not had the full conversation with the full board as to what this could look like. So I want to be like, spoiler alert upfront, that that's what's pending. I can share what the process would be if the board does decide that they want to take Measure P to the voters. So that's what I'll share today. And then what I'd really like to do is sort of hear from you at this juncture, which I know is difficult because you don't know what this might be. But if there are particular things that you would also like to see changed or carried forward or not, and I'm guessing there's probably more than that bucket. But if there are things that there is an interest on, that's what I would love to hear today, particularly because we haven't had this conversation with the board. So this is very timely for me to be able to hear from you all and then take that into the conversations. And we're hoping to know by the end of May whether or not this will move forward or not, just for context. So process-wise, if the board does decide that they want to put a ballot measure on it in November, the language has to be done into the registrar of voters for the ballot in early August, and it's either August 6th or 7th. I forget to look up the exact date, but it's August 6th or 7th, so it's a very tight turnaround. Process-wise, we would have to draft the ballot language, the measure, and then meet and confer with Scalia and the DSA. And I'm gonna circle back to that, but that's process, and then have a sort of a separate stakeholder engagement process, which right now I'm expecting would be this group, the CAP, Clean, and then obviously we would speak with the staff and the director there. And I'm sure there would be other public comment and process in that process. Ideally, or we pretty much need to get to an agreement with the DSA and Scalia before we can put it on the ballot. This is one of the points that we will be talking to the board about, because this is part of the issue that we have right now, is we did not do and complete a meet and confer before the first Measure P went to the ballot and was approved. And that's what's causing a lot of the lack of clarity and uncertainty in the litigation that we're seeing, and you know more about this, I would speak to it better than me. But that's what I'm hearing from the board, is they want to stop being in litigation. They want to stop spending money on litigation between the two departments. They want Measure P to work. They want the investigations to happen. They want the sheriff's deputies to partake in the investigations and not take the fifth, and actually answer the questions so that we can have completed investigations. And we don't have a process right now to do that. So conceptually, what I have heard is they want to go kind of through the whole measure and look at where is there lack of clarity? Where have there been issues that cause either, union issues, grievances, meet and confers? Or where have we had litigation that was very costly, and particularly where there still wasn't a lack of clarity or maybe a full resolution from the litigation, and take those things back out to the ballot. The conversations that I have heard, and this is the message that MSEO gave as well, is the intent is to clarify and strengthen it so that ILO can actually do the job that Measure P was supposed to do, right? Complete investigations to the public, which, as you've just heard on the two that John talked about, we haven't been able to do. That's because we don't have the information from the deputies. One piece is to add clarity, because I would read this letter, thank you for that. from the sheriff references this Live Barger and Garrity protections, and that really is the focus of this. And this is a question that, to be very transparent, we haven't resolved yet, and this is why we haven't decided if it's moving forward. The interest, my understanding, so don't hold me to this, because it could change, but the conversations that I've been involved in are, is there a way to grant Live Barger protections via the measure, or via the ballot measure, that would then essentially compel the deputies to talk, but they would also have the Live Barger protections, and then that sort of wipes that issue off the table, and they can come to the investigations and, you know, speak, but also have the Live Barger protection. That's number one. If that can legally be done, then we will discuss with the board, do they want to try to move that forward, and are there other things that they want to try to clarify? If we find out that that legally can't be done, that's a different conversation, and I'm not sure if it would move forward, just to be honest, so we would have that conversation with the board at that time, so what they can and can't do. I'm gonna stop there. I know that's probably not as much detail as you want, but any questions on the process or sort of the overall intent that we're looking at this time?
I find it odd that the stakeholders don't become involved until after the measure is drafted. It seems to me that that's kind of backwards, that one would want to talk to the stakeholders first and find out what their interests and concerns were, and then draft the measure. It's like being presented with a fait accompli and saying, hey, what do you think? I don't understand how, once it's been drafted, the stakeholders have anything more to say than a yes or a no. Yes, we'll support it, no, we won't. And that seems a little late in the game to involve them.
I wanted to ask, who initiates the meet and confer process? Is that the Board of Supervisors?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm gonna say yes, but it's generally the county, so depending on what it is, but almost, I mean, step back, the board directs all policies, so essentially, yes, right? They tell us, I want to implement this, and then staff determines with county council and the human resources department, is this, in order to implement this, do we have to meet and confer? So they are essentially directing that. That would be part of the conversation with the board, is if you want to do this, this is the process that we have to take. But the county initiates that, the human resources process.
Okay, and then my assumption is that DSA is not gonna be supportive of this, so how long does the meet and confer process take? Some community members have educated me and told me that it can take years.
Yeah.
So if I assume that, my assumption is that DSA is not gonna be supportive of adding like Live Barger and Garrity protections, for example. So if they're not in line and are not supportive, then I'm assuming Measure P is not gonna be on the ballot and it would stay as is.
I'm not gonna be able to completely answer this question, but yes, meet and confer can be very, it depends on the topic, right? Which is a very legal, easy answer to say, depends, it's very great. It can be short, 1 or 2 meetings, it can be years. And it can depend on the scheduling, right? And if both parties make themselves available, they kind of drag it out. This is one of my main concerns with this project is we'll know sometime, and we're already halfway through May, and we have to have the language done by August. The likelihood of the meet and confer, you know, being successful in that timeframe is honestly, it's low, right? It's very aggressive, particularly for something like this that has so. If the board's direction is to move forward, we will try, right? But that's a big swing. There are several different paths, and I don't want to give incorrect information, but if the goal is to have a successful meet and confer before the ballot, before the language is put on the ballot, then we may or may not be able to achieve that, right? By the date we have to make that decision in August. There is a process where you can implement, this is a global like labor relations unrelated specifically to this topic, but for any meet and confer, you can initiate the meet and confer, show good faith effort, and you can implement the change if it has to happen, and then continue to meet and confer about it. So that is something we would talk to the board about of, you know, sort of these ifs, ands, and how, you know, what would that process look like? There's some, I was from my opinion, some concerns with that, because that's essentially what happened last time, right? Where we had the measure, and then we kept meeting and conferring, and here we are, right? So I can't say for sure if that would be the path forward. It's an option though.
Thank you. Any questions?
Real quick, yeah, so the executive office at the county, are they of the opinion that meet and confer means meet and have total agreement, or just meet and this is what we believe should happen? Like my understanding is there's two types of meet and confer, and sometimes they get used interchangeably a little bit.
Yeah, so this is getting like nerdy into the HR land, but I used to be an HR director at a city, so I thought this is perfect for me. So, in my old world, there was a meet and discuss, which meant we have to meet with you and get your input, but we still have authority to move forward. Those are things that, you know, the county has management rights over. This is not one of those. A meet and confer is we have to keep meeting until there's an agreement. Typically, I mean, that's a negotiation. It's not take it or leave it. That usually is not successful. You can't try that approach. Typically not successful. So usually the meet and confer is more lengthy because you do have to reach a signed agreement where both parties have signed it. Like I shared, there is a process where you can implement and continue to meet and confer that, and then it goes down this whole other path that there's not agreement from the other side that I won't sort of get into. That actually can lead to litigation, so that's sort of where we've already been, just to be honest about that. If you don't reach a signed agreement.
Would you mind if I add?
Yes, please, you know the history better.
Yeah, many people in the community will ask me, you know, why does meet and confer take so long? And I'm about to oversimplify a very complicated area of law, but I think a general concept that is probably a fair summary is that state law looks at meet and confer not as a process that happens on a specific timeline, but a process that's designed to answer everybody's questions. So when people ask me, well, why does it take so long? Usually what I tell them is, well, the law in this regard is not about how long it takes. It's about the quality of the conversation. Again, it's a really broad simplification of a complicated area, but that's basically the touchstone is at the state. So it's not about the time. It might take a long time. It takes a long time, it takes a long time. And then we just have to take a long time.
So then aren't we resetting the clock for these discussions? If we introduce new language, then we're essentially starting from zero again.
In the meet and confer process,
Yes.
yes, it would be a brand for initiated process.
Want to take
So-
the fly barter?
So one of my questions is, John, would you be willing to speak to this group on everything that you just heard Jennifer say? And to add any context that you think would be useful to this group? So in other words,
Sure.
obviously, executive, Iolero director,
Well, I mean, I
What?
guess I really appreciated all the detail that Jennifer added, because the timeline she's describing, it is pretty daunting to have something ready by August to be on the ballot in November. Regardless of what one thinks of the content of such a ballot measure, that is pretty tough timing. One could, given that timing is pretty challenging, start a meet and confer process and some language drafting processes and stakeholder outreach, do all the things we talked about that are necessary to get a ballot measure ready, and have it on some other ballot. You know, one could start that process and you just see how long it takes, and maybe that's on a ballot in 2028 or some other time, or 2027. You know, so I think it may be useful to think about that as an option. I don't know what the board will choose to do, but they certainly could choose to start a process and say, yeah, we're not gonna shoot for November, but we'd like to start the process, and we'll see when we can get it on the ballot. I have seen that in other communities. Sometimes it's more a question of having a conversation and getting to a conclusion than it is about the timing. So that's something you might see here. It's a possibility. And then, yes, another thing I would say is, clearly some meet and confer needs to happen here in Sonoma County. I say that because it is clear that in the last rounds of meeting and conferring, this issue of the sheriff forcing deputies to speak to Iolero even when they assert their Fifth Amendment rights, wasn't fully resolved. I think everybody can at least agree on that. And I do think that, all the people at the table on that conversation say, yeah, we haven't been conferred on that yet, and that's gonna have to happen at some point. I don't know that that requires a ballot. I've met and conferred on that issue in a number of places and not had to do a ballot measure or a new statute or a new law or a regulation. Sometimes new department policy. So a concern I have is that if the only issue we're looking at is Live Arbor and Garrity, I think there are many models we can look to in other places. In which law enforcement agencies got through that meet and confer process with law enforcement without having to do the ballot measure or any ordinance or anything of that nature. Just a conversation that, as I mentioned before, is about quality, not speed, that results in some policies that sheriff's deputies can then look to when this issue comes up. So I understand what's going on. So I would, hope that part of the conversation that happens in Sonoma County is also, couldn't we just meet and confer about the library issue by itself? And have a conversation about that first and see where that takes us? Instead of jumping to the ballot measure, which I personally don't think is legally required, nor do I think it would change the analysis on the Garrity and Live Arbor issue. I mean, in that regard, it's a question of, management will. That makes sense.
Yes, you always make sense when you talk. Jennifer, what other issues other than Live Arbor have been identified in discussions about changing anything about the current Measure P?
This is where you're not gonna like my answer, but I honestly don't know, right? The extent of the conversation has been from Hermosillo and the comments that, have been made publicly that I think everyone has seen. There has not been a discussion with the full board, so I have no idea where the other four stand. Nor have I seen a list of what those items might be, right? I know we're focused on this Live Arbor and trying to get legal opinion about that, if it can be done in a ballot or not, and also via a meet confer, because I've heard some conflicting opinions about that. So that's one of the things that we're also trying to sort out, is what are the options with this. But I have not, staff has not attempted to start a big list.
So,
Can I make a comment about that,
Mhm.
Casey? And that is that there have been some conversations, Supervisor Hopkins, raised with me, a couple of issues, or at least one issue, explaining that if they go to meet and confer, that there will have to be bargaining and that they may have to give up something in order to get the Live Arbor Garrity. And one of the issues that she raised with me was the possibility of looking at the guaranteed funding and the funding not being tied to the budget of the sheriff. And I understand that a second issue might be to change the requirement that the removal of an executive director for cause must be by 4/5 of the supervisor, that the requirement could be reduced as a bargaining issue. And I know that there were some people asked about whether or not those were viable discussions, and we're told no, but.
I mean, those are outrageous. Those are outrageous asks to me. Just to be clear on that, but.
So, seems like the questions become, since we don't know what any amendment or repeal or replace would look like, obviously that's just darkness. And there's life to be had between now and this finish line that is who the heck knows where, right? So, in the interim, what we have is on the Live Arbor issue, the one that you've raised. What we have is a sheriff who has said a couple of things. One, he has said, I can't do that. I can't order that. And then he has also said a lot of reasons why he won't do it. He's mad at Iolero, a lot of different things. He thinks that You know, his deputies have been ill-treated in recent years for a number of reasons, some of which he explained and some he didn't. But anyway, so we have a sheriff who's saying, you know, I can't do that and I won't do it. So on the can't piece, okay, and again, right now, just putting Measure P, like, who knows, it's out there somewhere in terms of any amendment. So in the space that we have in front of us, what I personally feel like the board should do is ask county council to submit a public opinion on whether the sheriff has the authority to make that order. I take it, I understand that implementation of that order would require meet and confer, but making the order would begin the process, as I understand it. And I think that the only way, given what I've heard from the sheriff and assuming that he means what he says, is the only way to change this notion, the first comment, which is, I can't do it, is to get the county council to weigh in on that with a response to the question, is there any legal impediment other than meeting and conferring and satisfying labor law requirements? Is there any legal impediment to the sheriff ordering a deputy to answer those questions over a Fifth Amendment invocation? So I feel like that work should be going forward and that question should be answered. Because we've got, regardless of what happens to the future of Measure P, that's a live issue that can be dealt with now, at least by having county council answer that question.
That is part of the current research is.
Okay.
In both, can he, right, because the sheriff has Lineberger authorities under his constitutional
Mhm.
position. The question that I've heard posed most recently was if it's Ialero's investigation and not the sheriff's investigation, does it apply, right? So that's one that we're trying to sort out, like, is it the same, or does it apply? And then on the meet and confer issue, because I've heard both things, obviously from the director and then also from the sheriff, which are competing opinions of, can you meet and confer on that topic? And if you make an agreement, does it apply, right? Does it uphold the law or does it not? So that's another question that's being researched, in addition to, can you just solve this problem with a ballot measure? Right, so all of those are on the table.
Right, but we may be living through years where a ballot measure doesn't solve it and where we're looking to county leadership to solve it. And it's really, really important how the question is asked too. The question is there any legal impediment? Does anything prevent the sheriff from making that order? Deputy, you will do this upon pain of discipline. Not is that established elsewhere in law, right? But is it foreclosed elsewhere in law, right? Those are two real different questions. Anyway, thank you.
You know, I would just like to make one more comment about this. I understand the impetus for wanting to end this series of litigation, you know, back and forth over the powers of Ialero. But in my opinion, I don't think that another ballot measure is going to resolve that, even if you have meet and confer. This is an issue that is very contentious between law enforcement and the community. Communities want oversight, law enforcement, regardless of the way it's put out here, law enforcement does not want oversight. They don't see oversight as the same thing. You are going to continue to have litigation. Putting a ballot measure on is a very expensive, very time-consuming way of trying to deal with an issue that I think is going to be failed if your goal is to prevent the future litigation.
And I just want to get clarity on that, because I'm really trying to use this as an opportunity to like collect information from people and when I report back. Is there anything specific, or is it just that sort of, there's the inherent conflict and there's gonna be litigation because there's just inherent conflicts and you will never be able to like black and white it?
I think that's pretty much the case, yeah.
Well, right now, we're dealing with a situation where there is no question, I think, that Iolero has subpoena power in a whole wide variety of areas, but they don't have it in this little sliver of their own authority. That is suggestive of an attitude which is, we're gonna fight over every square inch that is not already covered with a response.
Yeah.
We're gonna fight over every square inch. And so I think that that's, supportive of the comment.
Is there any discussion about, if the California Supreme Court takes the case up, the wisdom of waiting to see what it might say to give credit correction?
I don't think that case would answer this question. It's just not presented in the litigation. So the question of how to compel a deputy to speak over a Fifth Amendment claim is not in any way raised in the litigation.
Is there any thought, it seems like there could still be some information from the California Supreme Court decision that would be useful information for any desire to amend Measure P? Has there been discussion about that dilemma of waiting to see what the California Supreme Court might say?
We're talking about. Initially, we're talking about no more than 90 days to learn whether they're gonna take it or not. So waiting the 90 days to see whether they do or not before embarking on this would seem to make a lot of sense.
We've conceptually talked about that. The problem with that is then we're past, we can't make November. Right, so if the board's direction is we want this in November, then we don't have time to wait, right? Part of what we're talking about at the staff levels, we need to understand what their interests are and are there overlap with that. And that may drive some of that decision, but if their interest is just Livebarger and I don't know what else, and not that, then we're fine, right? But that is the risk, if we move forward with something on the ballot, that then there isn't a next judgment, then we're back in a place of conflict.
Let me say that when some of us met with Supervisor Hermosillo, now this was before the Court of Appeal opinion, she floated the idea that perhaps whether Iolero was an inspector general could also be part of that amendment. And I would be interested to know whether that, given the Court of Appeal decision, whether that's still on the issue. And finally, I want to say, Jennifer, I am not saying to you that you should or staff should make this decision. I'm asking you to relay to the supervisors that moving forward at this point it does not seem to make sense, at least to me.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to echo Nate's outrage at the notion that this should become some sort of a trading session in which Iolero gives up authority and power in order to obtain the right to get its question answered, which is what's being presented. That is profoundly unacceptable, and I that's what I heard Nate say. I echo that very powerfully.
And that's directly contradictory to being in support of oversight.
Exactly.
I would also say, and giving up independence.
I had a question about. So the meet and confer process has to be done before the ballot language is put on by August 6th. But the stakeholders are not going to be involved in the drafting of the ballot language, and we won't get to see it after. So let's say we see it in the beginning of August and it's already on an agenda to approve. That doesn't give the stakeholders any time to review or make comments or anything like that. So I feel like there's not enough time. And my assumption is that, let's say a meet and confer process is initiated And in part of that process, DSA says, we want this part of Measure P to be taken out. And we'd like it striked in the revised language that's gonna be on the ballot. And then can the county actually agree to that without involving can we take something away from Measure P that's already been approved by the voters in exchange for adding something to this amended improvised Measure P that we don't really know is going to actually be improvised or fix anything?
So on the first part, I want to clarify, we would do the meeting for the stakeholder engagement at the same time. So as soon as we know, we get that board direction, I want to change these 8 things, then we would draft that language. We would initiate the meeting confer with DSA and Scalia, and then also share those drafts with the stakeholders at the same time. So it wouldn't be like it's final in August and now that's an FYI, because that's what that would be, right?
Yeah.
So they're, assuming that we get this direction either way in May, all of that hopefully is like late May, early June, where all those drafts are going out to all of the parties, so that's all happening at the same time. On the question about, sort of the horse trading, for when you're doing, for negotiations. What could happen, and I'm not sure if this is answering your question, but what could happen is we put out a proposal. One of the organizations requests some edits. We can negotiate and then we eventually agree, this is what we're gonna put on the ballot. And that could do anything, right? It could add things, it could take things away, it could just word tweak and not really have an impact, hopefully they don't end up there. If it doesn't pass, then the current Measure P still stands, right? So whatever we take, even if it's whatever it is, if it doesn't pass, it doesn't rescind Measure P, right? The current Measure P just stays in place, it's just unchanged. Does that clarify a little bit? It only changes if whatever we put on the ballot passes, which could be some conglomeration of our edits and the union's edits, to be very honest, it could be, right? To reach an agreement. But it doesn't take effect unless it passes.
By the will of the vote.
Correct. Yes.
But I guess another concern that I have is that something is drafted, and this happens all the time in government, where you can have so many people come to public comment and say that they're opposed to this new Measure P, and the board will still vote in favor of putting it on the ballot. And so how do we know that even being involved in the process is going to matter if the intent is really to just have some revised version on the ballot? And what if the stakeholders are not okay with, and these are questions that I think are valid to pass on. What if the stakeholders are not okay with any of the revised language? And we say no, and there's still an effort to push it through. Is that effort going to continue, or are we supposed to meet with our supervisors? Or what can we do as a community? Because many times we can go and speak during public comment gets limited, it doesn't matter. 100 people can show up and we think we're representing the will of everyone in Sonoma County, but still the supervisors might vote against what we think the will of the county or the community is. So it's almost like we're gonna do all this work and the community doesn't want it and they know it, but they're gonna do it anyway. So there's all these things that I think are crossing a lot of people's minds, and they're very concerned, and I can understand why. And I do also understand the sheriff's point of view, and that, that when he used San Francisco in his letter that he sent to us, or the email that he wrote to me. But I also think that we can't cover everything in one amendment, and then the state law is gonna change all the time, and we can't just put something on the ballot every time the law changes. So how do we take that into account? How do we know that we need that change now, and why can't we just wait and do it later if it's necessary? I just feel like maybe, they have good points of view, but maybe we don't need this at this time, and maybe we should look into ways of doing this without having to put it on the ballot.
At the end, yeah, yeah.
I was gonna say, so the board has come out and said that, you know, this was all rushed before. Sounds like they're doing it again.
Yeah, that was literally gave you my comment as well. It seems like November is like as quick as it could possibly go, right? And that's coming up really soon. So why are we rushing if we're saying that Measure P was rushed before and not perfect? Why are we even setting ourselves for that figure again, right? For that excuse again? I don't necessarily see November being a valid option to try to get it in November. With, you know, we have 90 days coming up that we need to pay attention to first before we make a decision. We want to move forward. I'm not in a rush to get it in November without having the actual time and being diligent about getting it right. So.
Well, Jennifer, the concern would be the motivation for hustling at this inordinate maybe rate is to avoid future conflict and future litigation with this fix. What if it doesn't do that? If it doesn't do that, then you hustled through some kind of a change and you didn't get the desired result. You spent the money twice. Here come the disputes just keep coming. You didn't take the time to actually make a thorough run at this, perhaps as thorough run, obtaining community buy-in and the like. And you didn't even achieve the goal, which is to make the conflict go away. So that's a real danger.
Yeah, the preparation for Measure P, was something on the order of 24 months. So.
I have a question and some comment. Well, first of all, thank you for being here. I think you're in the unenviable position of being a middle messenger, but I appreciate your
Very
candor.
educational for me, this will be my project, if it's forward, so this is like very.
Indeed, yeah. Indeed, definitely. Well, I appreciate your candor and thank you for being here. Couple questions. So you had mentioned that if this were to get on the ballot measure in this cycle, it would be early August that the ballot measure language must be approved. And the people mainly conferring with the Board of Supervisors in those conversations, you said there would need to be agreement with Scalia and the DSA prior to submitting that language. Can you remind us who Scalia is?
Sonoma County Law Enforcement Association, but my general understanding, and you know what I mean, is they generally are over the sheriff deputies that are in the jail, and DSA are the patrol deputies.
Okay.
Scalia also represents some other people in law enforcement and other county agencies, but inside the sheriff's office, just those deputies in the jail.
Okay, thank you. So then Scalia, which represents officers, and the DSA, which is also another union which represents officers. So am I to understand that those are the only two main players that would require to have agreement with on the language before the language is submitted to the registrar of voters?
That's my understanding at this juncture.
Okay, well, okay. Well, to Nancy's point, I think that's I think that's ridiculous, that we don't have a larger swath of people who need to be conferred with and who need to agree on the language before it's submitted. I mean, the tipping of the scales there is just so blatant. You have to get agreement from unions, which represent these officers, the very same unions which fought to get Measure P from going on the ballot the first time, the very same unions who were involved in the misinformation campaign of trying to tie Measure P to the defund the police effort, which is a blatant lie that they use to try and prevent Measure P from passing. The very same unions that have tied us up in lawfare and litigation over things that could be very simple, and that the voters, I think the vast majority of the voters would say is very simple in the way that it's laid out in Measure P. So the fact that we only need sign off from these unions before submitting language, we don't need sign off from this body, we don't need sign off from ILARO, we don't need sign off from a larger body that represents the will and opinion and insight of the voters of this county at large. I think that's incredibly problematic to begin with. Not only that, but Hermosillo, who is the board of our Board of Supervisors currently in her run for office, was endorsed by the sheriff and she was endorsed by the DSA. we have other candidates, we have other members of the Board of Supervisors who I think, the general sentiment of the public is they're very much more responsive to the DSA than they are to this body, than they have been to supporting John. I don't think I would be inaccurate in saying there's a general public sentiment from those who are following this issue that the Board of Supervisors has been incredibly weak on supporting Measure P, in some instances, and perhaps much more responsive to the DSA, to the opinions of the sheriff, et cetera. So all that being said, I personally don't have very much faith in what the quality of those conversations and meetings would be when it comes to representing the broader desire and will of the voters. I have next to no faith in those conversations, if I'm being quite frank. I would like to invite the chair, Marcio, of course, to attend our next meeting as well, and any meeting she would like to come to. I think we should continue to invite her to these meetings. In the meantime, given the timeline of what's going on here, at the very least, I would love to get a statement from the chair, Hermosillo, that could be assessed by the general public at large, that could be assessed by this body. I would love to hear an official statement from her on what her intention is in these conversations, on what the hopes and outcomes are in these conversations, as detailed as possible. Because, I mean, it just seems like the scales are so greatly tipped towards obstruction rather than good faith enhancements to Measure P. And someone else's point, yeah, compared to the amount of work that went into drafting Measure P to begin with versus the incredibly small window of time they would have to put it on the ballot again, regardless of the outcome of those conversations and what the language ended up looking like when they put Measure P there. I mean, just given the fact that in the first election, you know, just the blatantly false campaign of tying this measure to the defund the police movement, that was their main tactic that they used to try and confuse voters and get voters against this. I have clearly a very low opinion of the unions on this particular issue and on their honesty and on their good faith. So I think I agree also with many others who have said it's not necessary that we can go to the ballot again at this point. This could maybe perhaps just be done better through ongoing meet and confer and conversations. But all that to say, I would love to see a statement from Chair Hermosillo as soon as possible, given the fact that these conversations are ongoing, are up against the deadline.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it okay if I jump? Yeah, it's okay. Lorena, I think I might have heard you maybe throwing out a question about, you know, what happens if a board puts together a ballot measure, does the meet and confer, but the stakeholders disagree with the material that's ultimately in the ballot measure. Well, the final backstop there in California is that the voters have to actually vote on that ballot measure. And so if many stakeholders are dissatisfied with the ballot measure, it's possible the ballot measure doesn't pass. So a challenge we see in many jurisdictions in California when putting together a voter initiative like this is that the folks trying to shepherd that language through, like the board and their staff and county council, HR, have this challenge of trying to get language that will make it through meet and confer, but also be approved by the voters. And that may be very difficult in this case, depending on what comes out of meet and confer. So that's an additional challenge that we haven't really talked about tonight. But that is part of the reality of these processes. So we sometimes do see measures fail the ballot box. And I'm just going to, throw in a note here that you'll recall months from now, that if there is a ballot measure that goes on the ballot, I encourage you as a body to get some advice about what the appropriate role of the CAC is as a matter of law in California with the ballot measure. Well, before it goes on the ballot and after the board has put it on the ballot, because there are many opportunities for a group like this to speak out about what you'd like to see in the measure before it goes onto the ballot. Once it's been set up to go onto the ballot, Then further advocacy can be seen as using public funds to campaign for yes or no votes on a ballot measure, which is prohibited. So there is a window for a CAC to be active with county resources and conversation, same with ILRO staff. During which the language is being debated. But once a ballot measure is then set and the board puts it on the ballot, we cannot use resources here to try to persuade people to vote for or against it. Individual members of a government agency, like county staff or CAC members, certainly retain a First Amendment right to do that on their own time with their own resources and not at, say, meetings or at the ILRO office or even at the board of supervisors offices. So if we get to that point, I would just remind you, it's a good idea to get some direction, maybe from county council, about the rules before and after something's put on the ballot, so you're staying in compliance with those rules. Okay.
Thank you, Don.
Excellent.
Any other questions from CAC members?
I had one little comment here, so, and this is really for your office, and I think it's helpful to do this, but it's a little thought experiment. Let's just say this goes through and they get this on the ballot and it fails. The DSA at that point will come out and say there is no longer public support for oversight. Right, that's how they're gonna spin that. So I'm a little bit concerned that is almost the plan, right? Like put together a weak ballot measure, have it fail, and then serve it up on a platter to DSA to say, oh, well, see, the community no longer supports it. That things have changed. And I think that would be a disingenuous argument for them to make. But again, we're playing a lot of political games here, and it's frustrating to me, but I think it's good for you guys to think ahead about how that would be portrayed in the media and by DSA.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and open this up for a public comment and because it's really important topic, we're gonna do 3 minutes and I think the other items will decrease the amount of time. But we'll start with members in the room and I'll start on this side with this gentleman and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. Segue on the comments just made by this gentleman. For over 40 years, I've known about how the sheriff's office operates. One of my relatives was a deputy. Close to 50 years ago, the sheriff shot a young man named Schwitters in the back out off of Todd Road near Moreland. I went to the site the next day. When Andy Lopez was shot, I went to that site the next day. And basically, one of the things that we have to understand here is the sheriffs have the ability to kill people. And they do it. And one of the things that's going to come up on this whole issue is what he was just pointing to. There's a lot of disingenuous activity that goes on the part of sworn law enforcement people. I believe this whole effort is to kill Measure P. And it has nothing to do with trying to get a better approach on negotiating between what they call stakeholders. As a member of the public, I'm a stakeholder, but I'm never invited to any discussions. And I'm only allowed to speak for a very limited amount of time under their clock. They don't even pay attention to what you're saying. They're watching the clock. So I'm hoping that you folks will continue to man the ship and ride it all the way through and start right now. So, you know, we don't see anything wrong with Measure P. And we stand behind having a long negotiation period if you need that, based on the 24 months he mentioned before and where we're at now. I'm in no way, shape, or form any kind of an expert on any of this, but I just know many of the friends that I know intimately who have encountered activity with the sheriffs, including myself over in Roseland. They seem to feel that they are above the law. And the only way we're going to get them to really work with you is if you take a early position and say, hey, tell us what's wrong with Measure P, really, and do it in such a way that can be helpful. I can't stay for the full clam bake tonight, you guys. It's been nice. I'm gonna have to roll. But if you ever need my assistance in any way, shape, or form to come to a public meeting and speak in support of your activities, I've already been watching you from afar, and I appreciate that all of you are volunteers and you put so much time and effort into something that is actually so important. All right? Thank you. And if you ever ask, who was that guy? Just say that dude from Roseland, he was back. Okay.
Thank you. Just a moment. Other comments?
Hi, my name is Alshina Horseman and I'm in Chris Percy's district and he's the only board member that has been appropriately supportive. And I just did a quick Google search on how much it costs to put a ballot measure on, just on Ballotpedia, it was the $3.25 million. We've spent about close to $500,000 in litigation, and if they want to stop paying for it, stop approving it. They didn't have to approve to pay for this most recent litigation, why did we do it? I just expect more from the board, they should be stepping up and supporting the voters. Also, everything that was just said here, thank you, I agree with everything that was said in this room. And, let's see. I'd like them to stop watering down the Measure P. I'd like the board to get out of bed with PSA and be independent and do their jobs. And also, nothing personal, just take it back. Thank you very much for being here.
And one thing I'll just clarify on the ballot cost, and I could be wrong about this, so somebody, if I am wrong, when somebody knows it, please answer. But I think that's part of the interest of November is when you're going on a larger vote, like a primary. Every ballot initiative splits the costs, or if you do it on your own or at a different cycle, like probably like John said, we'd be looking at waiting until 2028 because it doesn't make financial sense to do it as like a single ballot measure. I think there's other interest in the timing, but I think it would be best to hear that.
So we love an estimate on
But
the
I
cost.
yeah, I know what that would be for this, so I can follow up with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this office was established because the whole entirety of Sonoma County was pissed off because the child was murdered. And they stormed the sheriff's office. And we went through a whole deliberative process that was broadly inclusive and had over a year's worth of opportunities for the public to participate in the initial establishment of the office. And I was vice chair of that, because you weren't here for that. So subsequent to that, the public weren't happy, law enforcement wasn't happy. Measure P came about through a 24-month long process. It was broadly inclusive. So this thing really belongs to all of us people here, right? It isn't something for the board to do out of public eyes with the DSA, because the DSA, since long before, I've been doing police accountability long before this board was ever established. And the DSA has no interest in meeting and conferring in a way that's gonna establish true accountability or oversight for themselves. And they never have, and they have gone through all kinds of disingenuous measures. When I was helping organize the marches that helped to establish this office, my window got blown out of the front of my car with a white pumpkin in front of my house, had 4 tires sidewall popped in different locations around the town. So, you know, you can say I'm a conspiracy theorist, but like, I don't really have a lot of enemies. You know, but I was in the paper as a big mouth was criticizing all of this process and all of this pushback from law enforcement to not have this oversight. And so whatever is happening right now, the public is not asking for Measure P to be amended. That's being decided in the courts. We're coming to the end of the road of decisions for what Measure P is, the way it stands, the way it's drawn now. If we go back and put this on a ballot and create a whole new set of arguments, the DSA is gonna grab a hold of every little change and see it as a new opportunity to keep railroading and holding up the activities of this office. All right, thanks.
So, that was well said. It's very rich on the part of the Board of Supervisors to feel like they have ownership of measure fee and decide things for us. That was created from an upwelling from the community after a tragic event. And it just feels really wrong for them to be using the words they've used, specifically Supervisor Hermosillo. And to be, seeing the DSA as the only stakeholders in this argument. It's just, it doesn't make any sense.
Bernice Espinosa, District 5, I didn't say that before. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here. Alcina had some of the same points, but I wanted to ask it from the perspective of the CEO's office. I know that there's analysts that analyze costs. Has there been estimates of the cost of writing the ballot and the cost of putting forward any campaign information with the limitations that Director Alden just mentioned? And compared to what is being spent on litigation, especially as Lorena has mentioned, if the stakeholders do not go forward or are against this particular measure and the voters do not vote for it, then the litigation will remain. So has there been analysis in all those scenarios? What is the current cost of the litigation? If we could put forward this ballot, what will be the cost? And if the measure ends up being failing, the continued cost of the litigation that's pending. And also, if there's a question about the fiscal responsibility and how much money can be put on by different county departments. The CAC was just mentioned, but the department with the sheriff's or the DA's office, and the impact on taxpayers for that. The next question I had is, the stakeholder meetings you mentioned were going to be with CLEAN and the CAC. Those do not reflect all of the stakeholders who are the voters. In this room, there are no Black people. In this room, there are no Asian people who have been affected by the sheriff. And so if there is going to be a stakeholder type of convening, wouldn't it be more appropriate, like the ad hoc committees that we already have in existence on this topic, that could also reflect unsheltered community advocates and mental health advocates? And lastly, on page 2, paragraph 4, the sheriff's letter refers to AB 1506. And aren't these questions that county council, as part and course of their job, needs to answer how the ordinance would interplay with this that doesn't require an amendment? And not a question, but a comment. Three of the board members depend on the sheriff for policing in the jurisdiction.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments of people in the room? Yes.
Well, my own view is that the Deputy Sheriff's Association doesn't believe in oversight. They don't have the public has the right to investigate. I think the intent of it's still start implementation of Measure B. And I agree with Nancy that anything they do is not going to end litigation if they put up some police effort to try to obstruct Measure B. That litigation will continue. I agree with the general comments that the Board of Supervisors needs to step up. Be more forceful and acknowledge that the public doesn't have a right to it, so. That's my view.
Thank you for your comment, Susan.
Yeah, there's a political ploy that's going on here.
of making statements that are false and saying them often enough that they become true. So that when we hear that it was rushed and that it was sloppy and they've got a whole series of words, and the sheriff says it, and our CEO says it, and the county council says it, and you go through and everybody says it. And then I was horrified to hear you say it, Jensen. Which meant you were automatically bought into the idea that this is flawed. And that was a problem for me. And of course, it's really aimed at the public. They have the other thing about how much money it costs. Well, the measure didn't make it cost money. The DSA made it cost money, but we were being told it was our measure that was it. Well, that's not true. And you know, I have to agree with Trevor, he didn't quite get to it, but we're just being lied to. They just lie. And I don't, you know, they played their hand, they exposed their hand when we're told, will you give up these things that essentially got the odds? And that's the point. And for the county government to play into this really bothers me because I've seen it before. After the task force recommended an office like Iolero, they had these smaller meetings, instead of in this little room and only a few of us showed up. And the attempt was to make it be the least effective office they could. And public was there to say no. And they got away with some of it, but they didn't get away with a lot of it. But we've been fighting this for a long time and we're going to keep fighting it. But it would be really nice if the county government would understand that we count and it's not just the DSA that counts. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of what everyone's saying, which I really appreciate everyone's comments, is really gets back to what the voters' intent was. The voters intended for there to be fully civilian oversight of the sheriff's office. There's no way that can happen if the sheriff doesn't compel you to testify to either. And unless there's some law I don't know about that prevents him from doing that, why are we even having this discussion? In my view, if there's no law that prevents him from doing it, we haven't fully implemented Measure P. We don't need to change it. We need to actually implement it. And why would you go to a ballot initiative to change something you haven't even fully implemented? And I will just also say that the comments about the Board of Supervisors, I'm all in with all of you. They are not doing their job. We, the voters, said this is what we wanted. This is our clear intent in Measure P. Now, if there needed to be a meet and confer about Lieberger and how that works, then guess what? That's what should have been driven, not lawsuits on ad nauseum. And I get the Board of Supervisors can't give an order to the sheriff, but if the Board of Supervisors are united in saying, we want this to happen, and the public is saying, we want this to happen, you would think we wouldn't be sitting here talking about a ballot initiative to fix a flawed measure that's been upheld in court every time it's gone to court, by the way. The only part of the issue that didn't get upheld is because the Board of Supervisors didn't do meet and confer. That had nothing to do with the writing or putting together the measure, sorry. So I would say it's fine. It's too high anyway, so.
It is. No, that's too hot.
The bottom line is, any communication you get from the sheriff, all you have to do is divide it into 3 sections. Lip service to oversight, obfuscate, deflect, and delay. That's just divided into 3 sections. That is what it's all about. Sorry.
Thank you. I think we got everyone in the room. Next, we have Jim Duffy.
Jim Duffy. I live in District 2. It is incredibly short-sighted to think that we can do anything on the ballot in this November. It took us 23 months between the first meeting at the CAC and when the voters voted on Measure P. We should not have another meeting where we are not given a redlined version of what is prepared to go to the ballot. Now, if you look at what we brought to the CAC in December of 2018 and what was brought to the CAC in August of 2020, there's about a 40% difference in those ordinances, and they're both redlined ordinances. But that's because we went out and talked to stakeholders. And you need to look at the August 3rd CAC presentation on the Evelyn Cheatham ordinance and go to the end of it and look at the 36 plus organizations that we did outreach to draft Measure P. So those are all stakeholders you need to talk to before you go to the ballot again. And some of them are incredibly frustrating to talk to because they have a process too. And so let me tell you, going through the ACLU in Northern California took me 4 months. Alona, God bless her, she took on North Bay Organizing Project. They were even worse. You know, they have a process, people have to look at it, they have questions. Doing this takes time. And the sheriff's deputies knew that we were going through this process, and they chose to ignore it and wait till the very end, and then abuse the legal system to try and jam it up. This is analogous to the environmentalists who use CEQA to jam up building of affordable housing. The DSA is using meet and confer to jam up oversight. It happens all over the place. Thank you for taking my... and when we go to draft it, there's dozens of changes we could put in. So let's look at November of 2028. That is the smart time to go to the ballot. That gives us time for everybody to come to the table. And we may have two ordinances going. There may be the DSA's ordinance and the community's ordinance. And we'll see how the vote goes. Thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you, Jim. No other hands raised from attendees online. So we'll go ahead and close public comment. And I just had one more question because we word all of our items as possible action in case the CAC decides they want to create a separate ad hoc committee or assign someone to go speak at a board of supervisors meeting. So you said that the board is going to decide whether they want to put something on the ballot at the end of May. Is that going to be an agenda item that the public can go and listen to, or is that a closed session, or how is that going to work?
I expect, and I'm being careful how I word this, because closed session, but I expect to receive direction in a closed session before the end of May.
Okay, and then the closed session could be that they direct an agenda item to be brought to approve later some.
But that would probably be at the end, right? So the agenda item would be after the language is final, and to get it onto the ballot, they have to take a public agenda item to put anything on the ballot, which would have to happen by August. So we should have general direction out of a closed session sometime in May, then all the work would start. So you would probably hear from me sooner, right? Though I don't know, it's gonna be the end of that.
Okay, and you would, so they would direct you to tell us what that direction
Drafting
was,
language.
because typically they say there's nothing to report from a closed session. And
Oh,
so,
correct, yes.
but if they give some direction to do something, we would know about that. If,
I won't speak to the closed session, I'm gonna be very careful about how I'm discussing that topic. But if there is direction to staff to move forward with this, then staff's gonna go ahead and draft it and then start the meeting for process and the stakeholder engagement. So that's what you would see next.
okay,
Can I ask a follow-up question? Can you explain to me why it is that these directions to staff happen in closed session? It's not litigation.
Labor negotiations, because it will be subject to meeting confer, so it's part of the negotiation.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you for that information. Bringing it back to the CAC, is there anything else that you guys want to do tonight? Aside from all of us just monitoring what happens with this push to amend Measure P? I don't have any ideas at the moment. Since we don't know what the entire board is going to do. Right now, we just have information on what Chair Hermosillo plans on doing and the sheriff. But aside from that, I don't know what else we can do aside from continuing to advocate on what we feel is representative of what the community wants and what's right for oversight.
I assume we're gonna discuss this draft letter that's part of the agenda under a different agenda item. The letter to the chair and the board of supervisors.
Yes, that's a different one. Okay, so Trevor.
I would like, if the rest of the CAC was on board, if we could maybe just draft a statement calling on Sheriff Hermosillo to put out an official statement. I would like to hear in her own words before these conversations go on, before it goes to the DSA, as soon as humanly possible. I would love for us to call on her to give us as much detail and as much clarity as possible of what these conversations are going to look like and what the voters and what the wider stakeholders can expect.
What do you guys think about that? So we're just asking her to provide a statement. No. You guys want to draft a letter or? I mean, Jennifer is gonna take back all the information. I do think we can contact, Nancy and I can contact her as chairs of the CAC. We're also all welcome to write to her, but if you feel like it's stronger for us to draft a letter. We can provide some, we can do, we can take action tonight that would approve a letter, without having to bring it back at the next.
Pre-authorize it, basically.
Yes, pre-authorize it, but who would want to write that?
Well, you guys.
Oh, naturally.
With him, the three, how about the three of you guys?
I would be happy to help write it as much as you need that, and whoever else would like to elaborate, but I would be happy to do it.
If, John?
Recalling that before Supervisor Hermosillo was elected, the other members of the board during that era expressed an ask to the CAC back in, gosh, 2022 or so. That if the CAC wanted the board to do something, needed some action, they really appreciate that, hearing from the members that each of those members of the board of supervisors appoints to this body. Like, in other words, give us a call, let us know what you think before you send us a letter. Was the ask. Now, I've not had that conversation with Supervisor Hermosillo since she came on board, so I don't. That I've heard from her a specific direction on that issue from this CAC, but that has been a general approach of many of the board members. So I just throw out that reminder. Some of them might appreciate a phone call from a CAC member.
I can call her at a time and.
Yeah, and I put out an email to Supervisor Corsi last week, but I'll follow up and try and get a call with him as well. I'll, of course, want to talk to him about all this. If we could all irrespectively do that with our own supervisors, I think that would be great.
I think so too.
And that would still give you space at your next CAC meeting to have a number on the agenda if you wish. Or not, depending on what we learn.
I won't please. Okay.
Presumably by that time.
Yeah, that's.
If you're hurricanes or whatever it is. You better have your language pretty much drafted. So we'll know by then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
On that timeline. Let me just, what I would like to suggest is that we thank you for coming and listening to us and giving us as much information as you can. And we would all really appreciate you I think you certainly have the sense of the room. I don't think that there was any,
No ambiguity.
no, ambiguity, no. So, I think that asking you to do that as well as each of us individually contacting our own supervisor makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that forward and it's part of my feedback package.
And if you have more questions after this meeting and you want to come back, I mean, I'm open and available to talk to you anytime.
I appreciate it.
So, I mean, if that helps, I really want to just put that out there. So thank you again for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah. Okay, so we're not gonna do the letter. We all decided we're gonna talk to our supervisors and,
Period.
yes. Thank you.
And we can tell them that Jennifer's got notes.
And this meeting is also recorded, so there's that as well. Okay, well, thank you for being here. I don't know if you'd like to stay for the remainder of the meeting. We have two other interesting items that we're gonna be discussing. We're gonna move on to business item B. Discussion and possible action on proposed letter to the Board of Supervisors about the current state of affairs between Board of Supervisors, Sonoma County Sheriff's Office and Iowa. And I will let Nate, you wanna introduce it since?
Sure. I mean, I think actually Casey drafted this, so I will defer to him and,
Maybe brief, it's already about to be 8 o'clock.
Sure, yeah, well, I mean, this is a fast moving train, right? So, our little ad hoc had a conversation about, making some, statement to, the chair and the board. There's nothing here, I don't think, that hasn't been said tonight. It was just a different format for this group expressing itself. I guess it has a few component parts. It sort of says, we're aware that there's a lot of conflict around Iolero. We're aware that there's some talk in the board for doing something to Measure P. Nobody said anything to us. Here we are. This is part of our portfolio, and nobody has said anything. The guy we look to, the director of Iolero, says he's good with the law as it currently stands. Can't imagine you're gonna change it to make Iolero weaker. You know, exclamation point. We're aware that law enforcement has got problems with Measure P, and from our perspective, a major problem is they just don't want fully enabled oversight. We don't think that's a good reason to change. And then ultimately just treating the Liebarger issue and saying what I tried to express to Jennifer earlier, which was, you have a county council right now who can say to you whether or not there is a legal impediment to the sheriff ordering his deputies to comply. If there isn't, then you guys, the board, you ought to be leaning on the sheriff to get that done so that Iolero is fully empowered. Here we are, happy to discuss any format, we'll come see you, you come see us, etc. All the best. So that's what it says. It's currently written. There's been plenty of other stuff said here tonight that is not in that letter as it's currently written.
Okay, any?
Can I make a suggestion on that is that. Well, first of all, thank you for this. This is really great. And when I read it, when it first came, I thought, yes, let's do it. But after tonight, I think it makes sense that what we decided to do in this last business item ought to suffice for the time being, and that we ought not to poke that bear with combining it with this, which is the sort of with John's admonition, which you and I remember, when we got kind of chastised for not not talking directly to our supervisors and then showing up at a board of supervisors meeting with a letter. Sort of. They thought it was a slap in the face, and I don't think we need to do that right now. So that would be my suggestion, that we hold off.
And I personally am good with that. I feel like, for me, I feel like we have been well heard by a member of the executive team. I think she's gonna report what came out of this room very accurately. That's the vibe I get. I'm okay with holding that. I will stick a flag in, I think we decide how we're heard. I don't think anybody else decides how we're heard, but in us deciding how we're heard, we use all of our skills and all of our intelligence and all the information that we have. And I think that's not an unwise way to proceed.
Yeah, it feels like we wrote this a year ago. I mean,
It does.
how much has happened?
And I'd follow up, like, you could just roll that item to your next meeting.
Totally,
Yeah,
yeah.
depending on what you learn in the next few weeks, and what you see, you could.
Yep.
Wordsmith it, add something, change it, and issue it, then.
Totally.
So.
We could also
Withdrawn.
approve it. You could also approve it tonight and sending it to the Board of Supervisors. Pending whatever they decide to do at the end of May. And if it needs amending, then we would table that for the actual meeting and vote then. But otherwise, if we think that we're okay with how it reads and we might need to use it and we want to just vote on that now so that it's ready to go, I think we can do that as well in a proper motion, if that's something that you'd also like to consider.
I think it's a different letter.
Yeah.
It would be a different letter, I think. Okay. So we'll, are there other comments? Okay, before we decide anything, we'll take public comment on this letter and we'll just do 2 minutes. Okay, I'll start with gentleman in the back and then with.
So I think that's a good position overall. The danger that I see here, I've heard this before from the Board of Supervisors as part of CIA. And what ends up as a result, the impact of that is that the public is excluded from the conversation. So like if you send a letter, we clearly understand what was contained in the letter and what the feeling was of that. And we won't know what the response is necessarily, because that's probably gonna come in private as a complaint to you. I know I got pulled into Shirley Dane's office a number of times for pissing off various people. And that was all outside of the public view, right? And so that's really not a good situation.
Thank you.
As a former county employee, it's interesting to see that the same tactics that were used as a county employee. I went to a board meeting to discuss Truth Act SB 54 IT 47s, and my director, the public defender, had me okayed me to speak in public comment. She was then chastised for allowing a county employee to speak during public comment. When the board members had said, chair at the time was Supervisor Rabbit, and said that county departments cannot be part of the conversation unless they are on the agenda as part of the conversation. So I would like to echo what David has said, that you all are not county employees subject to HR, and certainly you are volunteers and you can choose how to be heard. And one thing that may not be in the letter, but was brought about by Susan Lamont, and I've had these discussions with Marissa, and with Director Alden, this is the giving of false information and repeating it until it is true is a common tactic, not only with Measure P, but also with SB 54, constantly saying only serious and violent felonies. I have brought up many publications from the Press Democrat, other letters where these false statements have been said, they're repeated by board members, and I've asked, what can we do? Can we submit an ILARO complaint as to false statements? If the continued tensions exist to obliterate public comment, to obliterate ILARO, we will not have this ability to file a complaint.
Thank you for your comment. We don't have any hands raised online, so we'll go ahead and close public comment for that item and bring it back to the CAC. Is there a motion, or if not, we will table this. You can all request that we have it on the agenda for the June meeting. It's whatever you desire.
I just want to thank people for reminding us that there is a tactic to silencing us, and that we need to keep that forefront in our minds. Thank you.
I mean, yeah, I do agree with the, that it's definitely valuable to be as direct as possible in our first step. We should all contact our individual supervisors and have direct conversations. But also given the timing of what's going on, I don't see why it can't be an A-B approach of drafting something that could be ready to release as soon as possible, after those conversations take place. Or at least having it as the agenda item for next month. Having something perhaps drafted that we could get out. I think I'm feeling that just some of the value in that too is, when we're united as a body, with the public here among us and saying something, then it's gives more compelling case to our supervisors and to all parties involved, that they need to make a response. We're united as a body. As a body, we take the public input very seriously for the public, and this body say in unison, that we have a certain position or a certain feeling. And I think that gives a lot more strength, politically speaking, to them feeling on their end like they have to make an official response. And then they have to be detailed in their public statements about what's going on in these private meetings, about what's going on in general with these efforts that are ongoing.
So as the ad hoc that drafted this, what do you guys think after hearing the comments? How would you like to move forward with the?
Would you like to speak?
I mean, I guess we have been struggling a little bit as a body. When things move this quickly, it's really hard to respond in time. And so I'd say the last 6 or 8 months, really even, it's felt like we were chasing last month's news that were presented to us, and so we've always kind of been behind. So I do think we need to do some sort of pre-authorization of a subset of us that can speak for us, without it coming to the monthly meeting cycle, which is just so slow. So I think that is very worthwhile, and we should probably pursue that. And yeah, I guess that's my 2 cents about that. What do you think?
But specific to this letter,
I mean, the letter that he's talking about, or the one we put together?
the one that you put together.
Yeah, I think to me, that one's already outdated.
I think that we stand a better chance to be in a good position with more information to do that next month.
Okay. What were you gonna say?
As to your second suggestion, and that is can the CAC authorize a subgroup to be able to speak on behalf of the CAC on the subject that we've, like tonight, I don't think there's any doubt about the points of view of this, of this body. And so can we authorize, say Lorena and me as the officers to actually speak on this, whether it's in writing to the Board of Supervisors or whether it's to the Press Democrat or to, you know, radio, whatever. But to say, yeah, it's okay that you speak and speak on behalf of the CAC between now and the next meeting, if that comes to it.
Yeah,
And it could be, you know, it could be your ad hoc group.
right. I'd like to vote on that tonight, to be honest. That would be a
Well,
much. more
that's not the
powerful
item
tool.
on the agenda, so the problem with the Brown Act is that you have to discuss the item on the agenda.
No, sure.
The item on the agenda is this letter.
Yeah.
We could put on the next agenda
Yeah, yeah.
that we have the ad hoc or whatever we decide speak.
Thank God for Lorena.
Well,
I don't wanna get too nitpicky here,
Uh-huh.
but if your agenda is possible action proposed letter. Could the possible action be to have an ad hoc about the letter?
yeah, but I thought
That's
what they're.
different than the ask, I guess, maybe I missed.
I guess
But-
my understanding or
Not
what I
as
understood the
experienced.
ask is that when it comes to the, like, speaking on amending Measure P, that we all kind of are in agreement that that's not what we want, and that we can designate someone to say that to the Board of Supervisors every time this topic comes up, like the CAC does not support that. I guess that's what I was understanding.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I think I'm hearing that better. Thank you.
Yeah, and we do need the language, right? I mean, it's really hard, it's hard to have a theoretical conversation about a ballot measure when we have no language. We just have some bits and pieces of repeal and replace here and, you know, so it's very, to me, that's the first message, and I think our ad hoc made that very clear to me when we met last, was it's really hard to have a discussion about any of this until we have language. So maybe we push the Board of Supervisors for language ASAP,
Okay.
and that's the message.
Okay, and we're going to do that through the previous action that we made. We're gonna take no action on business item B, but
Yep.
we're going to have an agenda item to direct your ad hoc to speak on behalf of the CAC opposing amendments to Measure P,
Sounds good.
or whatever. We'll have that discussion in June.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone's okay with that? Okay. Moving on to item C. So we put this on as an agenda item because after we sent the letter to Sheriff Ingram regarding the incident that took place on October 5th, he responded back. I wanted you all to see what he wrote and if there's anything that you'd like to do, or we can just pause that for now and bring it back at another time. I mean, I remember there were 3 things that, I don't know if it was Casey or Michael who brought it up. That we start with this informal letter, or we create an ad hoc and review the actual policies, that we cited in the letter. And that the ad hoc will do research on formal recommendations. Or that one of the current ad hocs kind of tackle this on and look into it and to see if we can recommend something more formal. I can't remember what those were, but we took step 1, so we wanted to see if you all thought we should proceed and take step 2, or if this is something that we can consider later on, maybe at the retreat in January or something like that.
I was okay with his response, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean, I thought he considered it, and, you know, there's more stuff to talk about here maybe, but I don't think it needs to happen right now, so that's my 2 cents. I don't know what you guys think about it, but.
I'm fine with that too, although it's kind of a joke to say the accident was the primary cause of the poor man's death.
Right.
I'm fine, but it's it for now, we have bigger fish.
Exactly.
okay. Any other comments from CAC members? Okay, public comment on this item? We'll just do 1 minute. Any public comment? Okay, so we'll close out public comment and I will say, I feel like,
6 and 7, okay.
yeah, Iolera should be contacted, and didn't let this happen, but, we'll leave this for another day. So we're going to move on. We're gonna skip item 6 for the ad hocs and 7, and we're going to, should we just skip? We're gonna quickly go over committee reports and open time for public comment and the rest of the agenda. So community engagement ad hoc. Is there anything to report?
We met last Friday, and as mentioned at the prior meeting, you have all our meetings set out to send them at least Friday, once a month. And we'll be running to start doing scope of work for the part of our SMART goals and finalizing some more formalized agendas going forward here. We do have the list of already issued this as had previously started, and we're working on updating that with members of the committee taking charge of updating it as we work through it.
Okay. ICE and immigration.
I'm a little chagrined, we have not met, but we were gonna meet tonight to to choose a date. We've had a hard time choosing it, and I've been out of the country for 2 weeks, so not much to report tonight.
For language access, we had a quick Zoom meeting to go over the research that Ronnie has been doing and helping us with, and we have a follow-up meeting next week. And then jail programming.
Yes, so we have finally nailed down our tour date. We're gonna be going into the jail to take a tour next week, Tuesday the 19th. It's at 4:30 to 9 approximately. I believe for anyone else who's interested, there's still time if you wanna hop on board and be a part of that. We just have to submit basic info of who's coming. But I extend that invitation to anyone. If you wanna come along for that tour, we will be there. And we're very excited about that. And we've also been compiling just kind of a master document, doing some research, looking at other jurisdictions, looking at reform that's happening on the state level, looking at best practices, other areas that are involved in prison reform, so we can kind of get a very broad sense of the world, throughout the country, throughout California, of where people have been really successful, what models have been successful, just to inform ourselves. And we're also compiling a document for questions to ask of them during our tour. So if anyone has input on that, please reach out and contact me, and we'll take your questions to those high up members at the jail who will be conducting the tour. And yeah, we're very excited to see what comes of all that and see how we can be of assistance. I will say we generally got positive response from our contact person there, with excitement at the prospect and idea of our ad hoc kind of being used as a catalyst or intermediary with the community of trying to seek out more people in the community who would like to be a part of jail programming, more people who would like to come into the jail and volunteer, be that during mentoring, be that support for various types of programs, the arts, mental health. There's just such a wide opportunity of what can be done in the jail when volunteers and professionals alike come in to give time to those who are residing in the jail. So very optimistic and excited about the work we can continue to do. And if you all know of anyone who has a background in this, going into prison or jails, or someone who's trained in mental health or arts or teaching background, anything like that, if you can think of anyone in the community who might be interested, please feel free to get us connected, reach out to me, and I would love to have those conversations.
And you said it's from 4:30 to 9?
Oh, sorry, I misspoke. 6.
Oh, okay.
6.
Like, well,
If I didn't say that,
I do,
That's a long trip.
thank you for inviting other CAC members to attend, but I do want to caution that An ad hoc is not supposed to be more than a quorum, so if anyone else is tagging along, we definitely have to look into that because it should just be your ad hoc for this work that you're doing. We don't want to violate the Brown Act, and then we'll get in trouble. Okay, so now,
You skipped D. I don't know.
oh, it's like cut off here. Sorry, your ad hoc.
We just
Sorry,
spent
it's
the
not
whole,
sitting
yeah,
here.
so we did meet, we just spent almost all of this time tonight on our stuff, so I think everyone kind of knows where we stand and
What you're working.
what we're working on, so yeah, I think we're all good.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll do open time for public comment, and this is for non-agenda items. And in that time, we're just gonna do 1 minute. So if anyone has any comments, seeing none in the room.
That count also for 8, public comment as to item number 8?
So we don't take public comment on those, but you're welcome to contact the
If I can.
ad hoc chairs
Okay,
and yeah, send your comments directly to those applicants. Okay, so there's no comments for open time?
I do have
Oh.
a comment for a non-agenda item regarding the Truth Act forum and the ICE, the immigration matrix. So yesterday as of May 6th, the sheriff's update that was sent out, paragraph 10, the first article about the Truth Act says that victims are ignored, and I want to make it clear that this body, Ilero, has written precisely on how sanctuary allows for people to report crimes that they otherwise would not. The DA has also brought this up, and many other organizations and activists have brought in the perspective of victims. And then the update also continues to misstate and say that it's only serious and violent felons that are reported to ICE through the I-247 process. The matrix that was submitted today actually includes not just strikes, which are defined in the penal code, but also those crimes that are punishable by state prison, which includes something as simple as evading. And lastly, those who are registered either as sex offenders or as arson offenders, which could include misdemeanors.
Thank you for your comment. And there were no hands raised from attendees online, so we'll close open time for public comment. Any requests for future agenda items? Aside from the item that we said we're gonna put on the agenda. Okay, if anything comes up, please send us an email and include Rosette and John. CAC announcements. Any announcements from CAC members?
We have goodies to wish John a farewell.
Please stay at the after the meeting is adjourned. I did want to tell you all that I submitted the letter that Jim Duffy worked on for AB 2257 and that we all voted to approve and sent to the board. I sent it to each each supervisor, and Will Tosconi, who is the legislative analyst for the county executive's office. Thank you. He said that they were gonna look into it. I guess he stated he cannot recommend a position under the legislative platform. At this time, the board does not have plans to agendize AB 2257 for a position. In our letter, we did ask the board to support that legislation, that bill, and they won't be doing that, unfortunately. But I believe that we can all advocate as individuals in favor of that bill if we wanted to do that. And aside from that, I don't have any other announcements. Discussion of possible topics to publicize, anything? Okay, seeing none, then we're gonna go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 8:25 p.m. And our next meeting will be on June 10th. And John, you can always come back and as a member of the public. We're sorry that you're not gonna be at that meeting. We are going to miss you.
If I only get 1 minute before coming, I'd be very upset. Not gonna be diplomatic, I'd love to come in office, I get 2 minutes.
If it leads to that, we might want to create some rules around disruption.